Hello viewers, welcome to Top Notch Online TV. With you today is none other than Teacher Fidelis of Alliance High School. I'm a teacher of English, an author and an editor. With me today, I have teacher Risper. She's from PCA Kikuyu High School. She's a teacher of English, an examiner and an author. Next, we have teacher Emis. She's from Alliance Girls High School. She's a teacher of English, an author and an examiner. Students, we're still using Fathers of Nations, and today we shall be having a discussion on character traits. How many characters have we discussed so far? Can you list them? Do you remember them? Ensure that you go back and watch our episodes whereby we discussed these characters. Who are they? So today we look at the character traits, and remember, this is something that will be tested in English paper 2 when we look at excerpts. To start with, we have Professor Karanja Kimani, teacher Emis.
Hello viewers. Just a reminder, we said when you're looking at character traits, we use adjectives to describe the character traits. Just like Teacher Fidelis has said, it's set in question 2 excerpt. So you give the adjective for the given character and the illustration from the excerpt. So I'll start with Professor Karanja Kimani. The first thing is intelligent. Professor Karanja has studied at the Oxford University, is a professor at the University of Nairobi. So clearly from that illustration, you can see that he's an intelligent person. The second one is determined. When he joins University of Nairobi, Professor Karanja comes up with changes in the university. He says that the university should strive to bring change, not to just be the school for excellence. They should bring change into the university. So when he faces opposition, or the other colleagues realizes that or feels like he's overdoing things or he's being too radical, he does not give up. He is determined and he pushes for the change himself, and eventually we can see change happening at the University of Nairobi. He's also abusive. When his wife leaves him for Mr. Newborn Walomu, Professor Karanja goes to Newborn's office to go and confront him. He confronts him and accuses him of stealing his wife. And in the process of that confrontation, he abuses Newborn Walomu, and he calls him a greedy fat baboon. Still on the same pattern, whereby he is confronting Newborn Walomu, he's also brought out as short-tempered. So during the confrontation, he loses his temper because he couldn't take the mockery from Newborn Walomu anymore. So he engages into a physical fight with Newborn Walomu. Okay, all along still, where I say that he's determined, he's brought out as being evolutionary, because this is a person who wants to overthrow a standing mindset, someone who wants change, or someone who advocates for change. So he advocates for change at the University of Nairobi. The same illustration I used for determination, that he is determined. He advocates for change at the University of Nairobi and says that it should strive. The university should strive for relevance in the society rather than just focusing on excellence. There are so many other character traits that we can have for Professor Karanja, but those are just some samples to guide our learners on how you go about it. You give the traits and then you go specifically to the excerpt given and you give an illustration.
Wonderful. Thank you, teacher Emis. Then the next character we look at is Comrade Melusi, teacher Risper.
Oh, thank you for joining us. To begin with, we shall look at Ngobile Melusi as being vengeful. A vengeful person is one who makes up for a mistake he feels has been committed against him. Ngobile being vengeful, the illustration can be found from the summit. During the summit, you remember that Afolabi had been given some minutes to share with his friends. When it came to the turn of Ngobile Melusi, instead of addressing the people, he decides to go ahead and he's going towards the president of Zimbabwe, whom he feels has wronged him by being the one behind Ziliza's killing. Number 2, about Melusi, we are going to talk about him as being loving. Melusi exhibits feelings of love towards his wife Ziliza. For example, He cries whenever he thinks about the way Ziliza lost her life. At the same time, he pulls out a photograph of the wife and stares at it. We see that despite the wife being dead, this man still holds feelings of love towards her. Another trait of Melusi, the man is contentious. The definition of someone who's contentious is one who struggles with another due to discord. Melusi is contentious in that he decides to run for a political office so that he can go against Zimbabwe's president after Zimbabwe's president sidelined him and his people. Melusi is also patriotic. Melusi being patriotic, we can look at the fact that he was among the freedom fighters who had fought for Zimbabwe's independence. They had fought against Smith and driven him out of Zimbabwe. Therefore, Zimbabwe gaining independence is patriotic. The fifth character trait on Melusi, let's talk about him as being firm. When they were about to get into the summit, during a security check, he's being told, you cannot come along with a needle. Being diabetic, he used to carry a needle to inject medicine. But then the security personnel were telling him, you cannot go inside with the needle. But you see, the man refuses. The man becomes resilient. He does not succumb to the order. And finally, we see that he is being allowed to go in with his needle. Number 6, Melusi is also frank. Someone frank is someone honest, despite even the fact that they might be the ones on the wrong, but they choose truth over lying. And where Melusi comes out as frank is where he admits to, when he's having a conversation with Tad Longwe, he admits to Tad Longwe that it was a mistake for all the people that were in opposition to each run solo. They should have combined forces in order to defeat the president of Zimbabwe. That can be found on page 95. Finally, about Melusi, Melusi is also sarcastic, saying something here to mean the opposite of. Earlier on, we have seen that Melusi said these people lacked unity. But later on, he says there's one instance they achieved unity. And that instance, he makes a reference to the fact that there was a certain half an hour that all the opposition leaders came together, and when they were describing the elections, they were talking about them as a sham. All of them were on the same side in refuting the results of that elections. And in Melusi's words, he says that half hour, that the opposition parties disputed the election result was an instance of their unity. That is also on page 96. That is what we have about Melusi.
Thank you, Teacher Risper. And students at home, just know that when we talk about the character traits, we're looking at what the character does, what the author is saying about this character, and the interactions the characters have with each other. Using that information, then you can talk about the character trait. And remember, we're still using an adjective when you're talking about the trait and not a noun. The next character we have is Pastor Chineke Chiamaka. Teacher Emis, what can we say about this character?
There's a lot you can say about Pastor Chineke Chiamaka. To begin with, he's short-tempered. That is page 17. Page 17, he wants to know about the identity of the guide. So he keeps on asking him his name. And the guide, of course, does not want to reveal his identity because at that particular time, it is crucial that he stays just like the guide without them knowing his identity. So when he refuses to reveal his identity, the guide now, Chiamaka shouts at him. That's page 17. He shouts at him angrily because he couldn't get his name. Number 2, page 105, is brought out as being arrogant. Arrogant is whereby we are taken back through flashback to his past life before he became a pastor. We are told that he used to drive dangerously, and every time he felt like he needed to go to another place that was on a different direction, he would just swerve and change lanes without caring about the other motorists. And there is somewhere the text says that it was their business to know what to do with all the chaos that he caused in there on the roads. So he's brought out as being arrogant. He didn't care about the chaos he brought into the Nigerian laws. He's also religious. He's a pastor, he's a preacher at the church inside Africa, and although he uses the platform to talk against the evils in Nigeria, he's also a religious man, because it also pains him when he's banned from ever preaching in Nigeria. He's also courageous or bold. He openly speaks against the government in his church. He criticizes everything that the government does wrong without fear and without any feeling of intimidation from the government. So we can say that he's bold or he's courageous. He's also vengeful. He plans his revenge against the Nigerian president very carefully. Page 141. We are told that there was supposed to be a dinner for the ends of state, and during that dinner, although the dinner did not take place, it was cancelled last minute, but he had plans on how he's going to execute his revenge against the president of Nigeria, how he had planned to go and greet his aunt and embarrass him and shame him. So it's someone who is out to seek revenge for the evils that befell him in the hands of the Nigerian government. So we can say that he is vengeful. And the last one is persuasive. Page 110, in his sermons, he was very persuasive. He was able to carry the crowd, he was able to carry the congregation, and they were able to reason in his line of thought, to persuade them to see what he wanted them to see and believe what he wanted them to believe.
Okay.
Thank you.
So students at home, I hope now that you can talk about Pastor Chineke Chiamaka and talk about the traits we have. When we look at him preaching, in a way he's so persuasive indeed. He keeps saying, church, say amen. Yeah,
Amen.
yeah, and they say amen. And as we look at him preaching, we also see him coming up with some information that the people in the church don't want to talk about. Yeah, when he talks about this sermon on someone is watching.
God is watching.
Yeah, God is watching. Well, he makes sure that everybody is responding. So thank you so much, Teacher Emis, for that. And the next character that I want us to look at is Dr. Abiola Afolabi. Students at home, I hope you remember who this is. And maybe before we talk about Dr. Abiola Afolabi, this is the engineer. We have the engineer, Saif Tahir. Do you remember who he was? Which country did he come from? Maybe we can discuss that before we look at Dr. Abiola. So, Teacher Risper, what can you say about Saif Tahir?
Okay, about Saif Tahir, the engineer, he emanates from Libya. He used to be an engineer. Among the traits of Saif, we can talk about him. The one that comes out majorly, Saif is actually someone who is patriotic. A patriotic person is one who shows a lot of love for his country. And at the trait of being patriotic, you can have a number of illustrations. Number one, when you're talking about patriotic, we see that he joins AGDA, believing that it had the best interest for Africa. And the few minutes that Afolabi was sharing with his friends, when it was his turn to speak, he said, let's choose Path Alpha because it will give Africa its own nuclear weapons. We see that if we could extend the definition of patriotism, not only look at Libya, but to also cover Africa, we see that he has a love for Africa. Still on patriotic, maybe another illustration, you see, this man has been educated in Libya, Tripoli. He has graduated, and now he goes to further his studies in France. Some people mock him and they wonder, whatever he's going to study in France, how will it be of help to Libya? But then to his critics, he said his aim had been to go get educated, and then the skill that he'll get, it will go into building real nuclear weapons for Libya. For him, it is about Libya, and that one about him being educated so that he can help Libya in developing their own nuclear weapons can be found on page 117. A third illustration, we are still on him being patriotic. We see that when he's looking at the president of Libya, when he's calling him the man with the guts of steel, he had been excited at the fact that the man had nationalized all foreign businesses. At the same time, the man had closed down foreign military bases. We see that anything that favors Libya is also making Tahir happy, therefore he is patriotic. To another character trait of Tahir, we see him as chauvinistic. A chauvinistic person, by definition, is one who is devoted to one's particular group, the dictionary meaning, but then away from that, maybe if we could expound on the definition. A chauvinistic person is one who feels the group they belong to is superior. That is where we are having some men being male chauvinists, but today we are not interested in noun phrases. We are going to look at adjectives. Therefore, we shall just call him chauvinistic. And his chauvinism comes out in this way. After Miss Mahmoud rejects his offer to take her out, in his mind he starts to think he felt humiliated by a woman, nevertheless his junior. This can be found on page 121. He is being chauvinistic in that he believes that he is superior, being a man, and also at the same time he is a senior. The side that he belongs to is superior. Still on Tahir, we are going to talk about him as being vengeful. He exerts revenge on Miss Mahmoud by going to slap her after she rebuffed his advances. Character number 4 on Tahir, let's look at him as being hypocritical. Hypocritical in that when he is slapping Miss Mahmoud, he is not outright about it. He says he hides under the guise that the woman had uncovered her head during Culture Week, but in reality we know that this guy is slapping her for having rebuffed his advances. And also on being hypocritical, when they go to court, when he takes Miss Mahmoud to court, he says that Miss Mahmoud fighting back was because she was defying Libya in order to make a strong case against Miss Mahmoud. But you know that it is not true. Miss Mahmoud was not defying Libya. We still have another 5th character trait. We can talk about Saif as being intelligent. He has graduated in Tripoli and is even furthering his education by going to France. That is it about Saif Tahir.
Thank you, Teacher Risper. And of course, we're looking at Saif being someone who is chauvinistic. Yeah, someone who feels like whatever he passes or whatever he is asking for from Miss Mahmoud, she should just say yes without saying no to him just because he's a man. And now we had talked about Dr. Abiola Afolabi. I think this makes one of my favorite characters in the book. And do you remember the discussion we had in our previous episode on Dr. Abiola Afolabi? He was the guide. He was the person who was just giving information to the other 4 pad travelers. And so we shall be looking at the character traits of this character. And Teacher Emis, what can we say about this character?
Okay, Dr. Afolabi Abiola is still, or is also the guide. So I'll give his trait as the guide and still as Abiola. Okay. So at the beginning of the book, page 3, by then his identity had not been disclosed up. So he was still the guide, but you can say he is commanding or authoritative. So he uses a very commanding voice or tone when speaking to Karanja. Page 3, he tells Karanja, obey Professor Kimani, obey. So it's like every time Karanja tried to voice his own opinion, he didn't let him do so. He would authoritatively tell him that he has to obey every word that he says without questioning. The second one is page 9, is rude. Now this is when he had an interview with Miss Fiona McKenzie, and Miss Fiona McKenzie tells him that she found his book as pessimistic. So why is he now optimistic about the summit? So he gets angry and he says, quoting his words, that he's not going to defend his book before anyone, least of all before a third-rate reporter from the Gambian news. So he's very rude. He calls Miss Fiona McKenzie a third-rate reporter just because she questioned. She questioned his book. Page, the same page, I think. The same page, page 9, is also brought out as being proud. So when Miss McKenzie asks him, what is your role in the summit? Why did you come to the summit? He says proudly that I did not come. I was invited by the president.
Yeah.
The president wanted me here. And he also repeated by saying, the president. So he's very proud. He didn't just come for the summit. The president wanted him there. He's also hot-tempered. From the illustration I used to explain road, he easily gets angry when Miss Fiona McKenzie points out that his book came out as being pessimistic. So he tells her to go and read the entire book, not just rely on the blurb. He's keen and inquisitive. That is page 64. He was able to note that Miss Fiona, page 64, he was able to note that Miss Fiona's working station has changed from her talks now. Earlier on during the interview, she had said that she works for the Gambian News. Now she's talking about coming from the VOA offices. So he's quick to say, what were you doing at the VOA? I thought you said you work for the Gambian, yes. And he wants to know more about what she was doing at the VOA office, to the extent of saying that she's also working for the as an intelligent officer, something like that. Number 6, maybe almost the last one, is also brought out as being hypocritical or pretentious. Page 65. When Miss Fiona is telling him about what the youth at the VOA, Nicholas Sentinel, has discovered, that there is a guide and this guide is in charge of 4 other people, he fakes that he's not interested, he's very sleepy. But the truth is, he was just pretending. He was very interested. He just was afraid that maybe this youth is going to uncover his identity, and it was not yet the right time for his identity to be uncovered. So he pretends that he was not interested in whatever she was saying, but in real sense, it was just out of fear. Now, the last one is brought out as being considerate and reasonable. When his cousin Femi brings a young girl to his house, so that according to the Yoruba tribe, he can get married to her and have children. Pamela insists, Pamela was Afolabi's wife, insists that he should throw them outside, throw them out in the middle of the night. Femi, Abiola argues out that it's not right. Femi is still my blood. He's my blood cousin, my blood relative. I can't just throw him out. Yet Femi and this girl are just messengers from my tribe's people. We can't kill the messenger. Let us host them over the night, and then tomorrow in the morning they can leave. That's being reasonable, and that's being considerate, because you don't kill the messenger. Actually, the messenger is just bringing the message. And of course, he's intelligent. Because he's learned.
He is. Thank you so much, Teacher Emis. And of course, as we discussed earlier, we said that these are just a few of the traits that we have in the book, because anytime you're presented with an excerpt, you might have a different trait for all the characters that you're talking about today. So just note that whatever we are having today is not everything that we have in the book. Of course, we have more traits, and ensure that you keep going through Fathers of Nations. Keep using different pages in the book to see which character trait is being brought about. And last but not least, we have one woman who is just a phenomenon in this book, and this is none other than Fiona McKenzie. So what can we say about this character, Teacher Risper?
Yes, we cannot leave the discussion about character traits without having spoken about Miss Fiona McKenzie. Miss Fiona McKenzie, when I'll be looking at her character traits, the first one, I'll talk about her as being abusive. Her boss calls her when she was interviewing Dr. Afolabi, and she refers to the boss as silly boss who wants me back in the office. This brings out Fiona as abusive. Character trait number 2, let's look at Fiona as incorruptible. Someone incorruptible is also someone who is morally upright. Among the illustrations to bring out Fiona as morally upright or incorruptible, the first one, her taxi driver, there's a place they lose touch with the taxi driver. Upon the taxi driver coming back, Fiona learns that he had to part with a bribe, and she's advising the taxi driver against having had to part with a bribe. And up to there, because the taxi driver looks at it as the norm. Parting with a bribe is a norm. Therefore, he tells Fiona McKenzie that she just should leave him alone. He's not ready to toe the line or listen to her morality that he shouldn't have given a bribe. Still on Fiona being morally upright, we are looking at the incident with the Liberian mullah. The Liberian mullah wanted to take advantage of Fiona McKenzie sexually, and as much as he had almost overpowered her, he had even carried her, this woman does not succumb to his wishes. In fact, the woman calls out for help loudly until she's able to get rid of the Liberian mullah. Character trait number 3 about Fiona. Fiona is also grateful, appreciative, or we can even call her thankful. Fiona, character trait number 1, when Dr. Afolabi agrees to have the interview, to be interviewed by her, she goes ahead and extends her gratitude that he had agreed. You know, it is not a norm. Someone can actually refuse, but then when he accepts, she goes ahead and thanks him for having agreed to do the interview. Also on Mackenzie being grateful, we're going to talk about Mackenzie when she had been saved from the Liberian mullah, to show her gratitude, and she quotes it in her own words. She cites, one good turn deserves another. Now, to show her gratitude to Afolabi, she wants to let him into a secret, something she had learned. Now she wanted to share it with him so that she can show him how grateful she was. Another 4th character trait about Fiona McKenzie, we shall call her humorous, someone who makes jokes, and that is Fiona McKenzie. The illustration is that after she has had the interview with Dr. Afolabi, she urges him to go and take a photograph. You look excellent in a suit. Go take a photograph. You'll not look this good always. Those are her words. She's making fun of him. Therefore, she comes out as humorous. The 5th character trait on Miss Mackenzie. Miss Mackenzie is professional. A professional person is one who pertains to high standards of a profession. Now, as a journalist, does she meet the high standards of journalism? We are learning that. The answer is yes, and it can be supported using the following illustrations. Number 1, when Nick Sentinel is being introduced by Manley to Fiona, he tells Fiona, I've heard that you are the best reporter in town. That can be found on page 50. That shows that the woman is professional. What pertains to her profession, she's actually good at it. At the same time, another illustration on Fiona being professional, we can talk about when she is interviewing Dr. Afolabi. Afolabi observes that she knew her trade. The woman was familiar with what she was required to be familiar with. Therefore, she is also professional. Character trait number 6, which makes it the last character trait about Fiona McKenzie, but not that you've exhausted on all her traits. You can still find other traits present. Let's talk about Fiona McKenzie being courageous or being blunt. I'm talking about courageous, the absence of fear, but then blunt. Someone blunt usually speaks out their mind, and even her courage comes out not really in the actions, but in the manner in which she expresses herself. Miss Mackenzie, when she is interviewing Dr. Afolabi, she asks him very bluntly, your ideas, your book looks like it is pessimistic, yet you're now becoming optimistic. What is swaying you? Is your view being swayed by the fact that the people who had written the document for Omega, is it because they were prestigious? That is what she is asking Dr. Afolabi. Still on her blunt nature in her speech, Dr. Afolabi, there's a time it gets to that he loses his cool, he loses his temper. But Miss Mackenzie, she still does not get afraid. She continues to ask him, you have not yet answered my question. That is also, it takes courage to actually speak to someone who has lost the temper, but you're still insistent that the person should answer your question. And finally, we are still on blunt, courageous. We are going to look at her lack of fear even makes Afolabi to refer to her as a lioness. When he was initially meeting her, he had seen a lamb, but later on he realizes she was a lioness. Just by the mere reference that she is a lioness brings her out as being courageous. That is it about Fiona McKenzie.
Thank you, Teacher Risper. Of course, now we have a bit of information on Fiona McKenzie. And as usual, we have many other characters in the book. And just know, for students who will be sitting for the KCSE exam using this book as an excerpt in KCSE paper 2, just know that sometimes you can have other minor characters that you can talk about. And these, we can talk about Nick, we can talk about the presidents, especially when you talk about the summit. So depending on what you have in the excerpt, then you can have many other characters. And also note, when you're talking about these character traits, can you ensure that you're having a character trait and you describing, you're explaining, you're giving an example from the excerpt at hand to support whatever it is that you're talking about. And with that, students, ensure that you go to our last episodes. We have discussed so much more using Fathers of Nations, and we still have so much more to come. As usual, we give you a platform that is engaging, that ensures that you learn and grow. And with that, it's a goodbye from the team. Until next time, goodbye.